Our story begins with the male version of Cruella snapping at his goons, Harvey and Vernon. They were hired to steal puppies. What they're struggling to transport is evidently an adult dog. With a nervous apology, the two idiots rush back inside to steal the right animal this time. During the next day, we see many kids stopping to play with an adorable Street Bernard puppy. There's always a parent to cut it short before they get any crazy ideas. Tough. It looks like the little guy is about to spend another night here. Unless someone decides to rob this specific store, of course. Harvey and Vernon have finally managed to locate what their boss wants. They even know how to trick the alarm system. But before we mistake them for a pair of professionals, Harvey makes sure to screw it up again. Apparently, security systems do not stop working after you break in, and you still gotta be careful on your way out. Who would think of that, right? Police sirens are heard as they frantically grab the puppies. Vernon is not exactly an ace behind the wheel, so the cages begin to bump against each other in the back of the truck. As some doors begin to open, altruistic puppies immediately get busy setting their peers free. When Harvey decides to check, there's a pile of empty cages blocking his way. Even worse than that, a tenacious Jack Russell Terrier named Sparky is determined to escape the truck. Harvey's idea to control the situation is to scream "bad puppy" with so much despair in his voice that no one would point at him as the alpha around here. By the time Vernon stops the truck, the door is wide open and Sparky is probably in South America. The Street Bernard takes the opportunity to escape too, hiding inside a garbage bin. Forced to admit that his fancy boots are not made for walking, Vernon gives up on the rogue duo. In the morning, the puppy goes out exploring this strange world full of scary cats and loud noises. Hiding in the bushes, he watches a man come out to the front yard. His name is George Newton, and he's the kind of person you wouldn't recognize without a frown. But for some reason, the puppy decides to make this man the proud owner of a Street Bernard. Looking at the papers, George misses the home invasion. The dog climbs up the stairs and sneaks into his bedroom. Time to meet the family, then. Alice is George's wife, and they have 3 kids. Rice is the grumpy teenager. Ted is still scared of nightmares, and Emily is the youngest, which makes her the most promising liaison. Knowing how challenged her husband is in terms of joy, Alice is surprised to see the puppy. At the breakfast table, George is suddenly surrounded by smiles. Everyone is so thankful and happy that he's rendered speechless when he realizes what they're talking about. While the kids begin the usual custody battle over the pet, George tells Alice he's never seen this dog before. He also sincerely hopes he won't have to see it in the house for much longer. Always a supportive wife, Alice says he's free to kick out the dog right now. All he has to do is tell the kids himself. George makes an effort to be the firm dictator he's worked so hard to become, trying to ignore the devastated look on their faces. But it doesn't even take them a full minute to break that man. Clinging to a shred of pride, he declares that this is only a temporary solution until they find the owner. Alice tries not to burst into laughter. At night, the Newtons try a democratic game to name their new pet, which doesn't go very well. That's when Emily starts to play the piano and the dog barks along. There's no doubt in the girl's mind that he is communicating his wish to be called Beethoven. Considering that Ted's suggestion was MC Hammer, we can say this doggy is a bit of a snob. Still hoping for a way out, George spends the next few days working hard to find the creature's owner. But it's hard to find the energy to put up posters when you've got so much urine to get off the carpet. Beethoven grows heavier and harder to handle as weeks go by. At least there's some training going on in this house. From walking the dog in the rain to sharing the Thanksgiving turkey, George's every action demonstrates his ability to roll over. Of course, there are still times when he finds it hard to hide the pain. Like when Beethoven dives into the mud before napping in George's bed, which is then followed by a glorious slobber rain. Things get even tenser when a business opportunity turns up. George sells air fresheners, and some people are looking to invest. But he is so dependent on a predetermined schedule that even a tiny change makes him panic And that's exactly what's bound to happen when you have a housemate like this. Putting him behind bars is useless, as he has already dug his way back to freedom. Beethoven spends the day scoring all kinds of goodies around the neighborhood. But it's not all for himself. It turns out that he kept in touch with Sparky all this time. Not all the Newtons are having a good time, though. At school, Rice gets ignored by her crush, a boy named Mark, probably because she's highlighting a textbook at the gym. At work, George is boring the investors with sentences that would make ChatGPT blush. And all the while, poor Teddy is putting up with a trio of bullies. Come to think of it, the dog is the only one having fun. Or at least until Rice begins to talk about Mark and his girlfriend. Despite the pajamas, Donna is the most popular girl at school. But Rice's problem can be fixed. When it comes to get a human's undivided attention, she needs to leave it to the expert. Mark is easily lured by the awesome dog, and Rice is delighted to discover he even knows her name. Even George gets to end the day on a positive note. He's invited for dinner with Brad and Bry, the smug investors who are still on the fence. But Ted is still fighting off the bullies on the school bus. They chase the boy all the way home, which turns out to be a big mistake. Beethoven may be deaf, but he's not blind, and he won't let them off easy as he did with Pajama Girl. Not noticing his loyal defensor right behind him, Ted attributes their cowardly retreat to his own physique. At night, George is satisfied to see Beethoven get in the doghouse like a good boy. He doesn't know about the tunnel yet. The moment he turns around, the dog goes straight to the sofa and even turns on the TV. While George investigates the noise, Alice checks on the kids, and Beethoven takes her place. George gets back to bed, ready to make an exception and give some attention to his wife on a weekday. When Alice returns, he is disgusted to realize it was not her moves that he was responding to. Meanwhile, Sparky is collaborating with a homeless guy, trying to fetch him an empty can. He gets captured by Harvey and Vernon again. At the same time, Mr. Cruella is having a business meeting about a new type of ammunition. His client wants to find out how messy it is, and they'll need large dogs for the tests. That's when we find out Cruella's identity. When he's not doing shady business, Dr. Varnick is a veterinarian. Guess which very large dog is his next patient? Yep, it's Beethoven. The Newton only brought him for the routine shots, but Varrick won't let a perfect specimen go like that. So he asks for a word in private with George to escape the children's infallible villain radar. Faking concern, he tells him how street Bernards are violent and unpredictable. They can look like the sweetest best friend today and become a murderous beast overnight. Those words are quickly stored in the back of George's mind. To support business, Alice is getting back to work now. The kids are left with a lady named Devonia, who looks like she was designed by Tim Burton. At the office, Brad and Bry are happy to announce they will be investing after all. The couple makes a point to be even ruder now, but George really needs their money, so he invites them over for a barbecue. While the kids are trying to do their homework, Devonia is at the piano singing Lady Marmalade of all songs. No one notices Emily is playing dangerously close to the pool. No one but Beethoven, of course. George has blocked the tunnel since their conjugal incident, and the dog gets agitated by Emily's screams when she falls into the water. Breaking free, he crosses several backyards before the heroic jump to save his friend. Emily is almost dry right now, and that song hasn't finished yet. She sends the dog back home to avoid getting in trouble. When the kids notice that Emily had fallen, Devonia immediately focuses on gaslighting the child. Repeating that there was never any real danger, she tells Emily this will be their little secret. Unfortunately for her, Rice and Ted are old enough to see through those gallons of makeup. They demand to call Alice, and Devonia gets fired on the spot. George tries to downplay the incident. He thinks they can still find a better nanny, but Alice is traumatized and decides to stay home with the kids. But home is not a work-free place for them today. Brad and Bry are sitting outside. When the kids are bored enough to leave the table, The couple begins to talk about Newton Auto air fresheners. They are planning to trick George with the fine print and take over the company in about 6 months. As they can't see anyone around but that fat old dog, nothing stops them to speak freely about the scam. They change their tune when their host come to the table, of course. Brad is eager to shove the contract into George's hand and get that signature as soon as possible. Alice begins to suspect something when they mock the idea of reading the whole thing first. Playing the cheerful hostess, she says they should put the paperwork away and enjoy their meal. Bree realizes that the wife is a problem. She decides to use the dog as a distraction and brings him closer, not knowing that she's digging a king-sized grave for herself and her hubby. Beethoven circles around the table a few times. Then he begins to bother the humans, just waiting until someone is dumb enough to make him fetch a ball. The dog is happy to oblige, catapulting the entire meal into the air and dragging the terrified guests down the street. At night, Alice says they're doing just fine, and there's no need to expand the business. Being so greedy just gets him involved with devious people like those two. She's proud of Beethoven and his ability to judge character. George has a fit to hear her talk like that. He says everything was fine before that dog arrived, and now his dreams are ruined. But Alice had enough, and she won't back down. Before going to bed, she warns him that those dreams might cost him his family. The kids are secretly eavesdropping on their argument. The next day, they wake up before their dad for the first time in their lives. Ted walks the dog. Emily does her best to fill his bowl, and Rice gives him a much-needed shower. Even George's breakfast is taken care of. When he comes down the stairs, the kids promise they'll take up all the dog chores, and he won't have to do it anymore. Everything seems to have turned out fine, but there's still a third of the movie left. Ready to save us from endless happiness, Dr. Varnick comes knocking on their door. He says this is a follow-up visit on the rabies shot. You know, like all vets do all the time. Alice offers him a lemonade, and as soon as she goes inside, he begins to rip the sleeve of his shirt. Emily is watching from the window as he smears a red liquid on his arm, pouring some over Beethoven's face as well. She begins to scream when he hits the dog, but by the time the adults arrive at the scene, the damage is already done. Emily accuses him of hitting Beethoven, but Varnick says he was just patting him on the head. The fake injury looks so serious that Alice can't bring herself to doubt the man. George walks him to the car, apologizing for the incident. He says the dog has never done anything like that. Varnick reminds him of what he said before and warns him that next time, it could be one of the kids. To make sure George won't chicken out again, Varnick puts one more danger into the mix. If that dog isn't put down as soon as possible, he'll have no choice but to press charges. When he gets upstairs, the children are crying. Emily says he'll never believe her because he has always hated Beethoven. That's only partially true at this point. George gets the collar with a heavy heart, and the image of Beethoven as a puppy keeps haunting his mind. Yet he puts him in the car and leaves without a word. Ted sees them leaving, and they all start to cry, running after the car in despair. George keeps driving and talking to Beethoven. He says his dad did the same thing to their dog when he was a little boy, and he hated him for that. He swears he doesn't want to do this, but he has no choice. When they get to the vet, Varnick quickly applies bandages to his perfectly healthy arm. He praises George's decision to do the right thing, incidentally saying he got 37 stitches. George gets emotional when it's time to say goodbye, but lets Varnick go ahead and lock up Beethoven. The secretary says he'll be charged for the night because the employee who deals with capital punishment is on his day off. Getting home, he finds his family having dinner in silence. The kids leave the table as soon as he walks into the room. Meanwhile, Harvey and Varen are transporting Beethoven to the warehouse. Varnick says he needs to be ready. They'll test the new bullets first thing in the morning. They put a muzzle on Beethoven and take him to the same warehouse where they're keeping Sparky. It's a very sad night at the Newtons. Alice says all the dents and the slobber that George hated so much are what made their house a real home. She points out that Emily never lied before. In fact, she could only be accused of being too honest. George asks her why would a vet lie about something like that. Alice doesn't have an answer, but she says they're choosing to believe a stranger at the expense of their children. Listening through the door as usual, the kids come out to demand a second chance. They convince George to take them to Varnick and force him to confront Emily's version. The good doctor is stuffing a cabinet with banknotes when the deranged family arrives. Anxious to get rid of them, he says it's too late. He's already been put down. Now it's George's turn to get suspicious. Why was he charged for the night if there's no dog to spend it there? Rice takes the opening to get past the vet and inspect the premises, and a brief brawl ensues, grabbing Varnick's right arm. George is shocked to realize that Emily was telling the truth. Every inch of respect he's been losing over the years in this family is instantly restored with a nice punch in the middle of the vet's face. The Newtons then leave Varnick's office after making sure Beethoven is not there. Then, they'd follow the vet to the warehouse. While Alice calls the police, George tries to see what's going on through the skylight on the roof. He ends up crashing into the building just when Varnick is about to fire the gun. Sparky takes the opportunity to bite him where it matters. The Newtons get their dog back and free all the others. Harvey and Vernon manage to escape but soon find themselves surrounded by angry Dobermans. Varnick ends up in jail for animal cruelty, and George learns how to accept change and embrace all the new family members. And this is the end. So, what would you have done in George's place? Do you think Varnick got what he deserved? Let us know in the comments below. Until next time.